Perfect. All right, let's start.
So going in the video.
It is. I love it. Happy holidays, everyone. I'm Katrina Dibble, the Director of Marketing at MA Polsey, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's Regulatory Compliance webinar. But before I introduce our speaker, I want to encourage you to reach out to me via email or in the comments section to provide us with topics that you'd like to see us cover in the future. Your input truly matters and helps us to provide you with subject matter that you are most interested in. Now, I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Isherwood, or as I like to call him, Cyber-ish. Or today, it would be Santa-ish.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. He is our senior security analyst, and he's going to talk to you today about regulatory compliance.
Hi. So, Cyber-ish here, right? Regulatory compliance. What exactly does that mean? If you have a cybersecurity insurance provider, they want to make sure you're compliant with everything. And what does compliance mean? It means to follow the rules.
Yeah.
Right? That's what compliance is. And so regulatory compliance for cybersecurity issues comes from a variety of areas. So we're going to talk about the purpose of compliance. We're going to talk about the types of compliance here in New York State, because after all, we're in New York State, our clients are in New York State, so those are really the ones that kind of matter the most, right? Then we're going to talk about what happens when you violate compliance and what kind of penalties and things might there be. So the purpose of compliance, right? Following the rules. A set of guidelines. That's what compliance is. When we're talking about different regulations, okay, whether it's a federal compliance reg, like Sarbanes-Oxley or HIPAA or NIST, or any of the variety of federal compliance regulations out there, or New York State compliance, like New York State SHIELD Act or New York State Education Law 2D. The whole point behind compliance is to give your organization a framework that you can follow that will allow you to say our organization is secure. Now, what it gives the regulatory bodies, like the federal government or the state government, is an assurance that all the organizations within their purview are adhering to at least a minimum standard. So without compliance regulations, it's kind of like the Wild West. Yeah. Everybody gets to decide what they want to do, how they want to do it, when they want to do it, that kind of thing. It makes clients and customers uneasy, yeah, because they don't know if, we'll say, Bank A is protecting their information as well as Bank B.
Right.
Okay. So we come up with regulatory compliance issues so that we know that both Bank A and Bank B are meeting at least a minimum standard. Now, does that mean that that's all they have to do? No. No. Businesses are fully within their purview to go above and beyond the regulatory compliance. The regulatory compliance requirements are a minimum baseline, a standard that says we're doing at least what our due diligence says we should be doing. Okay. That's the point behind compliance. Okay. So in addition to, I've mentioned, here on my slides, I've got NIST, I've got HIPAA, I've got the Securities and Exchange Commission, which they run Sarbanes-Oxley, and then we've got the Cybersecurity Maturity Model, CMMC, okay, which is a compliance regulation for organizations that want to do contracting with the government. Those are all federal regulations, okay? They insist on a minimum amount of policy. They insist on a minimum amounts of compliance. And the whole point of it is to guarantee a continuity of security for all organizations.
Yeah.
So your medical insurance company has to worry about HIPAA. Your human resources department has to worry about HIPAA. They have to make sure that they're protecting your healthcare information. Because frankly, aren't we all a little tired of having everything we own leaked? I mean, I'm tired of getting notices from organizations that say somebody broke into our organization, they stole all of your personal information.
Yeah, I just had it happen.
Did you had it happen? Yeah.
Just yesterday, my Amazon account is frozen. from some kind of strange activity on my account.
Which at the holidays, that's rough.
I know. Even for my Fire TV, that's rough. So.
Oh, from your yeah. So, I mean, we're tired of now that those notices that we get.
Yep.
That's part of regulatory compliance. Almost all of these regulations and these compliance things tell us how an organization who has to be compliant will notify us in the event that there has been a breach, right? But if they're really following all of the compliance rules and procedures and policies, then they should be taking steps to protect that information so that they don't have to notify us that there's been a breach.
Right.
That's kind of the whole idea.
It is.
All right. So we're going to take a look at New York State because MA Policy Consulting, we're here in New York State. All of our clients are here in New York State. And in addition to all those federal regulations that we have to worry about, we really have to worry about the New York State ones, okay? So we're going to talk about the New York State SHIELD Act. We're going to talk about what we call Ed Law 2D,
Yep.
which is really the New York State Department of Education Law Section 2D. Okay?
Yeah, we do a lot in education too.
We do
so
a
that's
lot.
a big one.
We do. And then we're going to talk about 23 NYCRR 500. Now, that's a bunch of mouthfuls.
Yeah, say that 10 times fast.
I don't want to say that 10 times fast. All right. So the New York State SHIELD Act is run by the Attorney General's office here in New York State. And it requires every business that deals with New York State has to adhere to a minimum standard for security.
Yeah.
Ed Law 2D is by the New York State Department of Education.
Yep.
And it says to every organization that is an educational institution in New York State has to protect the privacy and personally identifying information of not only their employees, janitor to school superintendent and every teacher in between, okay?
Yep.
But their students as well.
Absolutely.
And then 23 NYCRR 500, really long title, right? For the New York State Department of Financial Services, or as we call it, NYDFS.
Yep.
Okay. It is Part 500 of Title 23 of the official compilation of codes, rules, and regulations. So, Title 23.
Yep.
Okay. Compilation of codes, rules, and regulations.
Yep.
NYCRR. Part 500.
Part 500.
Part 500.
That must be a laundry list.
It is
of
a
compliance.
huge list. I don't want to print it because
I wouldn't either.
It would kill a tree,
It
right?
would.
But that regulation governs financial institutions that are licensed to do business in New York State.
Okay.
Okay, and they're the ones who have to comply with that. Those are the three really big ones for New York State. Are there others? There are smaller ones for smaller businesses and special niche kind of business stuff.
Okay.
But these are the big ones. These are what I would call our big dogs.
So
Okay.
if you are in compliance with these, you probably are okay with the smaller ones, right?
In many cases.
Okay.
In many cases. So a financial institution has to worry about 23 NYCRR
Yep.
500. They also have to worry about the SHIELD Act.
Yes.
Okay. Schools have to worry about Ed Law 2D and the New York State SHIELD Act.
Right.
Okay. So oftentimes there's a lot of duplication of information, a lot of duplication of requirements,
Yep.
because we want to make sure that there aren't any gaps. All right. But if you're compliant with one, often many of those compliance issues are also in another one.
Makes sense.
Okay. Personally identifying information and Ed Law 2D, okay, covers more than just healthcare information. It covers all personally identifying information.
Okay.
But if you're compliant with Ed Law 2D, you're probably also compliant for HIPAA.
Cool.
Because it is privacy, personally identifying information for healthcare. So how does a small to medium-sized business, how do they navigate all of this?
There's so many.
There's so many requirements.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at the New York State SHIELD Act. Now, the New York State SHIELD Act, are you ready? We call it the SHIELD Act all the time because it stands for Stop Hacks and Improve Electronic Data Security. SHIELD.
You
Okay.
didn't even have your cheat sheet there.
No, I didn't. I'm getting good at this one, right? What does the New York State SHIELD Act mean? The New York State SHIELD Act means that every business that deals with what I would call New York State entities,
Yep.
has to comply with a minimum standard for cybersecurity to prevent their information of all their clients and their employees from falling into the hands of bad guys. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Now, national businesses. You just mentioned Amazon. Okay.
Yes.
I was going to use a bank as an example,
Yeah.
but Amazon works. Okay?
Okay.
Any business that does business in New York State has to comply with the SHIELD Act, whether they're here or not.
Right.
Okay. Amazon has clients in New York. Amazon ships to New York. Amazon has warehouses and distribution centers in New York.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe their headquarters is, I think it's Washington State or California. It's on the West
Yeah.
Coast, right? They still have to comply with the New York State SHIELD Act. A small mom and pop business in, well, let's pick one of our border states: Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont. Okay.
Yep.
They do business with people who live in New York, or they do business with companies that are based in New York. They have to comply with the New York State SHIELD Act. A common misconception is that it only applies to businesses in New York.
Yeah.
And that's not true. It's everybody who does business with New York has to comply with the New York State SHIELD Act. Okay?
So it applies to a lot of
A
companies.
lot of businesses, and a lot of them may not even realize it. You know?
Right. Yeah.
So the SHIELD Act says you have to do your due diligence. You have to maintain and implement reasonable safeguards. It covers notification for data breaches. It covers standards for security. It has technical safeguards, physical safeguards, administrative safeguards, all included in the SHIELD Act. Right? So if you want to know if your business is compliant or not, you need to do an assessment or an audit to determine whether you're being compliant with all of New York State SHIELD Act. Because unfortunately, if you're not compliant, there are repercussions. Okay?
Yeah.
It's a carrot and a stick thing. Okay?
Got
The
it.
carrot is, if you're doing it and you're doing it well and you're compliant, then your clients and your customers should be happy. Right? And business moves. If you're non-compliant, here's the stick side. Okay? Then there are penalties galore that can impact your business, and some small businesses cannot afford that.
No.
So you have to ask yourself, if you're a small and medium-sized business owner,
Yeah.
can I afford not to be compliant? You need to ask yourself that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay?
Because it's not only financial. I mean, you're talking about their reputation.
You can be denied. Well, you know what? We're going to get to penalties later on.
Okay.
So we'll get to that later on, okay?
Sounds good.
So, and New York State Education Law, Section 2D. Okay? What does that cover? It applies to all educational agencies in New York State.
Okay.
Okay? And it's concerned with the unauthorized release or accidental disclosure of personally identifying information, which you might sometimes see abbreviated as PII. Okay? It was created to enhance and guarantee the privacy and safety of school systems.
Yes.
Now, not just, and I said, not just the staff. I mean, it covers the superintendent all the way down to the janitor, but the students as well,
Yeah.
and their families. All right, because schools collect a lot of information.
They
My wife
do.
and I have 5 kids.
Yeah.
I remember filling out those forms every single fall.
Yeah.
That has all of your phone numbers and email addresses and physical addresses, names for your kids, alternate pickups and points of contact for your kids. There's a lot of personally identifying information that we probably
is.
don't want out in the public, because I don't want
Right.
people knowing that about my children. Right, so that's really important.
And we've had some recent school districts and universities right in our area that
We've
have
had, yes, there have been schools that have been victims of ransomware. There have been schools that have been victims of data breaches, all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So educational agencies, and this is really important, they're third-party contractors.
Yeah.
Okay, are required to perform obligations to keep that information secure. Those third-party contractors, or TPCs, is what they call them in the compliance regulation.
Okay.
Can be any number of organizations. So I'll take a school system and think, so who might TPCs be? Who provides internet access for that school? Okay. Do they outsource janitorial? Do they outsource cafeteria? So
Right.
cafeteria outsourcing may involve children paying for school lunches. So there could be financial information about children that are part of the cafeteria system. And some schools outsource their cafeterias.
Yeah.
So that's a thing, right? If the school outsources the school store where you can buy, a
lot of them do.
cheer
The shirts
gear and
yeah.
shirts and hats and pom-poms and stuff, right? If the third party is running that school store, they could be collecting financial information about your children or your families. So those third party, that is those third party,
Yeah.
contractors.
And that's important.
TPCs they call them, right? That's really important. They have an obligation to protect the information of your student as strong an obligation as the school does. And they fall under Ed Law 2D as well.
Got it.
So maybe you have a medical supply company, and that medical supply company supplies the school nurses in the school with all their supplies. They have to worry about it because they're a TPC, right? So lunch cafeterias, medical supply company, maybe you outsource the janitorial services, maybe you outsource security. Maybe the schools run their own security.
Right.
Buses, bus routes where kids live, those are all possible TPCs, and they have to worry about it as much as the school does. Okay.
Okay.
And 23 NYCRR 500, New York State Department of Financial Services compilation of codes, rules, and regulations. It's a mouthful. I know it is.
It is.
Okay. Now this one is run by the State Department of Financial Services. Okay.
Yep.
And it is there to protect the customer and client and consumer information of any financial institution in New York State. Now they have a broader definition of financial institution than probably most people at home have. Think about insurance companies.
Yep.
They have your financial information. Investment companies, that's a financial institution. If you have your 401k, your IRA, or whatever with an organization, that's a financial institution. Healthcare reimbursement, whether it's an HSA or an FHA?
FSA, is it? No, FHA.
Health savings account, HSA.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Those companies, they have your financial information. Okay? All of those companies, they all fall under the New York State Department of Financial Services.
Yeah, and this is really interesting to me too, because like some of these I wouldn't have thought of. You know, when you say financial institutions, like
when I say financial institution, you think of a bank.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
credit
it's so much.
union.
You're so much bigger than that. So much bigger than that. If an organization holds your pension, that's a financial institution. So they have to comply with this. And the whole point behind this regulation is to protect the cybersecurity information and personal information about your clients, customers, and consumers. That's the whole point behind the DFS. All right. So everybody has to comply with one of these.
Okay.
I can't think of an organization in New York State that doesn't fall under at least one of those three somehow. Right? Yeah. New York State Shield Act is the catch-all.
Everyone
hit that one, right?
Yeah.
But even if you're, an insurance company in Pennsylvania, if you have New York clients, okay, then you have to worry about that. You have to worry about the NYCRR. Okay. If those clients happen to be a school, then you also have to worry about Ed Law 2D also.
Yes.
So think about this. How about an insurance company or an investment company that handles the medical insurance or retirement accounts for teachers? New York State Shield Act, NYCRR 500, and Ed Law 2D. They get hit with all three, right? So a general rule of thumb is if you can comply typically with the federal organizations, okay, so NIST, okay?
Yes, we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, if you comply with NIST, 800-171 or 800-53, or the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. NIST has several different ones. If you comply with those federal regulations are the inspiration for a lot of these New York State ones. If you can comply with those federal regs, you're probably really close to being completely compliant with these New York State ones.
So that's really good information because our company uses that NIST framework.
We use all of those.
Yeah.
We use all of those. Okay. If I look at my to-do list, okay, we're doing assessments for companies for New York State Shield Act. We're doing assessments for New York State Ed Law 2D. We're doing NIST Cybersecurity Framework gap analysis, CMMC compliance, NYCRR. We're doing all of those for different clients and different customers at different levels.
Yeah, so one of the questions that came in was just kind of to this point is there some kind of cybersecurity compliance program that really hits all of those? So if you're compliant with this program, it will trickle down to all the other ones.
The old one ring to rule them all theory. Yeah, I get that. It would be nice if there was a master compliance that says, if I'm compliant with this, I'm compliant with everything.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're all written by different people, okay? And they all have different areas of concern. New York State Ed Law 2D is very, very focused on the educational community.
Yep.
And no offense to any of them, they don't care about the financial community. They
Right.
care about the educational community.
Right.
So when they wrote theirs, they were inspired by NIST, but they wrote lots of very specific education things into it.
Got it.
Okay. Same thing with the NYCRR 500, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're worried about financial. They're not worried about education. So they have lots of financial specific things in there. So unfortunately, there's no really overall arching one.
Okay.
That blankets everything.
Yeah.
But if you comply with the NIST and the New York State SHIELD Act, you're probably compliant with about 95%
So
of Ed Law 2D
that's
and the other ones.
incredibly helpful.
That helps a lot.
Yes.
That helps a lot. Now the penalties for non-compliance, increased risk of security, and the increased risk of your or potential opportunity for your business to have a breach. Because if you're compliant with these regulations, then you're doing all things right for security. You have an incident response plan. You have a security awareness training program. You have good policies and procedures. You have good technical controls. You're filtering. You have firewalls. If you're following these rules, then you're setting yourself up to be safer.
Yes.
So not following the rules means you're setting yourself up to not be safer.
Yeah.
All right? There are also possible civil and criminal punishments, such as fines. If you really are in violation, could be even imprisonment with some of them. Okay? The financial ones tend to hit you where the pocketbook. Okay? There could be millions of dollars of fines for not being compliant with NYCRR. Okay? There could be censure, as in your company's not allowed to do business. Imagine you're an insurance company and the state tells you that because you're not compliant, you're not allowed to issue any new policies. Or you're a financial institution and they tell you you're not allowed to invest anymore because you're not compliant. An educational institution that is told that because they're not compliant, they're not allowed to run their own programs anymore. The state's going to step in. Things like that are all possible, right? Breach notification is one of the big ones that most companies tend to have problems with, and that's where some of the heaviest fines are. If you have a data breach and you do not notify people in an appropriate amount of time and in the appropriate method, with the appropriate information about the breach, those are all covered under your compliance, then there could be fines, and they tend to escalate.
Yeah.
Okay? Instead of a blanket, you're going to fine for $1,000, you're going to get fined $5,000 per incident. Or in the state of the New York State education one, the Ed Law 2D, like $20 per student that you lost the information on. So imagine if you lost the information on every student in the district.
Yeah.
It'd be thousands of kids at $20 a pop. Things like that happen. So it's really important that you become compliant. Businesses need to become compliant because it protects them, it protects their customers, it protects their clients.
Yeah, and I would assume if you're a smaller business, really you run the risk of going out of business because of the fines.
You could. How many small to medium-sized businesses have a war chest, if you will, or a slush fund set up to take care of compliance? Okay? And if I am a small business owner and I work my tuchus off to make money and then have the state come in and take it all in a fine, and now all that money I spent, all that time I spent the last 6 months earning money, they just took it all?
Gone. Yeah.
What business wants to do that? What business is going to survive that? Not many.
Right.
Not many.
Right. And their reputation's on the line.
They are. So, do we have any questions from our viewers here?
We do. We
Excellent.
do. So, one of them here is kind of going back to what we were talking about. There's so many regulatory compliance, that you need to keep up with. What is that, end all be all? Is there one? And you really answer that. Like, NIST helps.
NIST helps a lot. If I was a business in New York State, I would probably start with the New York State SHIELD Act.
Got it.
Okay, and for most compliance inspections and compliance issues, I would start off with a risk assessment.
Okay.
To determine. So if you don't understand your risks, then you don't know what you're protecting.
Right.
Or what you're protecting against.
Right.
Okay. So a risk assessment will identify all of the components within your organization that need to be protected.
Okay.
And how much risk is posed against them. So I'd start off with a risk assessment, then a security assessment, and a vulnerability assessment before I finally did the am I compliant part of it.
Got it.
All right, because those first three are going to help you check the boxes, lock the windows, shut the doors, put up the right controls, and then in the end, you do the assessment, are we compliant? And if you
After you have
follow
those in
if you
place.
followed all the advice from the first assessments, when that last one, that compliance assessment comes in, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape.
Awesome.
And I would start with the New York State Shield Act one.
Okay.
And then what will happen is your education institutions, your financial institutions, all those specific ones, their report will say, okay, you're doing really good, but here's the few that you need because of your specific industry.
Right.
It's a much easier way to handle small bite-sized chunks.
Yeah,
know?
exactly. So if you have like this framework in place, most of the information covered, then it's just, a few little, industry specific, and you're good to go.
There you go.
Love it. Okay. So another one is that someone's been told that it is very expensive to outsource.
Oh, expensive to outsource? Well, I disagree. I disagree.
Okay.
I actually think outsourcing is a very smart business model because does your small to medium-sized business, which only has anywhere from 10 to 100 employees, all right? Do you have a team of cybersecurity experts who, I'm talking 4, 5, 6 people, that's all they do is cybersecurity, okay?
Yeah.
Do you have a team of that many people that are that qualified to look at everything you do and maintain it on a regular basis?
And how expensive is that to have that team on your team, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
when you hire a team like that, you have to worry about what they call the hidden overhead costs of hiring staff, right?
Yeah.
Each one of those people needs a computer. They need a desk. They need healthcare. You have to include them as part of the rents because you're paying rent on a building for them to sit in the building. Right. You have all these extra ancillary costs. That really raises the cost.
Yeah.
So do you have 5 people like me on staff that
Right.
cost you
Right.
that amount for money?
Exactly.
Or do you hire an outside agency to come in that has people like me with 30 plus years of experience doing this?
Right.
And we come in, we do the job, we do the assessment, give you the report and leave. We're available if you need help remediating things, right?
Right.
You want help fixing the things that we found? We can do that too. But then you don't have to maintain that annual cost of having somebody like me or having 5 somebodies like me on staff. So no, I actually think outsourcing is actually a more cost-effective way of handling it.
Okay. Yeah, totally agree. Let's see. Who checks on your compliance program, and are businesses subjected, or how often are they subjected to these checks, these compliance checks?
So typical compliance checks are usually done annually. Some of them you have to check the compliance reg.
Okay.
Some of them biannually.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Who does the checking? Well, companies are expected to do their own checking, so that when things change, they update. All right. Third parties like us get hired to come in and do it. Okay. Auditing companies. If you're a financial institution, you may be required to comply with what's called a SOC 2 audit.
Yep.
The auditors, when they come in, compliance check is what they're going to do, amongst other things.
Yeah.
Right? And for some organizations that are federally or state regulated, all right, those regulators will also come in and do audits.
Okay.
So if we take a bank, for example,
Yep.
okay, the bank has to comply with, because they're federally insured, federal audits.
Yeah.
Federal auditors will come in and check whether they're compliant and check everything on the compliance list.
Yep.
They have to worry about state auditors because they're doing business in New York State.
Right.
So they have to be compliant with all the state auditors. All right. The compliance department at the bank will also be keeping an eye on everything else.
Wow.
And it goes along without saying that the auditors at the federal and the state level will not take the input from the local people who work for the bank, because it's in the bank employees, the bank's Department of Compliance. It's in their best interest that the bank passes the audit.
Absolutely.
Okay. So very often, institutions will hire a third party, outside agency to come in and do a check before the government gets here.
Yeah.
Okay, so that we will go in, check everything out, give you an idea, are you going to pass this government audit that's coming? And if you're not, what do you need to fix to make sure you pass it? Because if a bank doesn't pass those audits, then they're restricted from doing bigger business.
Absolutely.
Right? So if a bank wants to buy, if you have a medium-sized bank and they want to go buy a smaller bank, we're talking about millions of dollars worth of money.
And you know that happens all the time.
Right. They're worried that if the federal auditors come in, they may not pass that audit.
Yeah.
Okay, and be prevented from expanding the bank's growth by millions of dollars. Is it worth hiring an outside agency to come in and make sure you're going to pass?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, it is.
So Ish, we just had another question that came in, and this is a good one. What process should be followed when an employee disobeys company policy?
Okay, so company policy is typically directed by one of two things, either best practices or regulatory compliance.
Okay.
So when an employee violates policy, that's not necessarily a regulatory compliance issue. The regulation that they have to comply with dictates what kinds of policies your organization should have. All right. One of the most common ones out there is security awareness training.
Yeah.
Right. Every New York State Shield Act, and Law 2D, the NYCRR, they all, HIPAA,
Yeah.
NIST, they all say a company has to have a security awareness training policy and program. Now, the regulations don't tell us what has to be in it. Okay. That's up to the company.
Okay.
All right. So the policy should have rules and ramifications for what happens if it's not followed. Every policy should have something in there that says, if you do not follow this policy, here's what could happen to you.
Right.
Okay. So the regulatory compliance part of this, what we've been discussing, doesn't say what to do to the employee or how to handle that. It's up to the company to decide. Okay. But it should be in that policy. So if an employee violates that policy, the company decides what the ramifications are.
Okay. Now, say something that we've been talking about in previous videos has been using your personal email and your company laptop.
One of my pet peeves.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
so
you could introduce different viruses. And
oh, sure.
Say that happens. Say you've used your personal email and you've been attacked in that email. Now the whole system is susceptible, right?
Right. So there are attackers out there that if they want to get a foothold in your company, if they can figure out who your employees are, and we have a lot of defenses to prevent phishing attacks here inside the company.
Right.
But what if they phish me at my personal email account or social media?
Right.
If I'm accessing those accounts from my company provided electronic resource, my laptop, then when I click on those links and those emails or download that attachment, visit that website, whatever, I could be infecting my company computer.
Which is huge.
Right. So what happens to an employee when they do that? All right. Now, I'll tell you this right now. It's one of my pet peeves because when I first got my Gmail account, we didn't have these.
Yeah.
With my cell phone here, there's no reason for me to be accessing my Gmail account, my personal email account, from my company laptop.
Absolutely.
I have it in the palm of my hand. Right. There's no reason for it to ever come here. But if it does, and I'm responsible for infecting the company, then we have to take a look at which policies did I violate.
Right.
I could have violated several policies: acceptable use, email use, social media use, etc. Right. If my infection of my laptop causes the company to lose 10,000 records,
Imagine.
at $20 a pop,
Yeah.
then they might not want me working here anymore. I just cost them 20 grand.
Yeah.
If what I didn't really result in any bad consequences, maybe they won't be so mad. Maybe they'll make me go through security awareness training again.
Right.
So it's going to depend, really going to depend on what the policy says and how bad the violation was.
I know.
Not all violations of security are created equal.
Right.
Some have minor consequences. Some have major career-ending, business-ending consequences.
Yes.
So it really would depend upon what they did.
Yeah.
But that's why I when I do security awareness training, I tell people, don't do that. Do not open your personal email on your company laptop. Do not go searching eBay and Amazon from your company laptop.
Right.
Especially with the prevalence of these devices, there's no reason why anybody should be doing any personal work on their company provided resources.
Makes sense. And who wants to be that person that brings the company down?
I'll tell you right now, I do not want to be responsible for infecting the company network, and we get ransomware and we lose all this money and get all these fines and fees and penalties, and then the company goes out of business, and then there's 50 people down the hall here that are all going to be upset with me.
Yes.
If I'm responsible for that,
Absolutely.
right? So no, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, me neither. No.
No. So that's all of our questions today,
That's
right?
all of
Right.
the Questions for.
So here's my last slide, right?
Right.
I always call it the thank you very much if you need to contact me slide, okay? So I'm Jeffrey Isherwood, Senior Cybersecurity Analyst here at MA Pulse Consulting. I hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. I hope you learned a little bit. Please remember to like and subscribe to our videos, because that will help you get notified whenever new short videos come out, which is about once a week,
Yep.
or our end of the month webinars, all right, which give you the opportunity to register for those. Katrina already said, if you've got topics you're interested in us covering, email her, put something in the comments. I'll do my best to hit any topic you guys can bring up. I would love it if you gave us some challenging topics. I would love it if you gave us some challenging topics. All right.
Yeah.
But you know, that being said, I hope you learned a lot today. And this is our last video for the year, 2021. Goodbye, right?
Yeah.
I hope that on behalf of MA Pulse Consulting, Katrina Dibble and myself, Cyber-ish or Santa-ish, right? I hope you have a happy and safe holiday. I hope you're not victimized at all. And you come through the close of this current year and into the new year safe and well.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here, ready?